Hello and welcome to English Stories with Louisa. I'm your host, Louisa, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey of exploring fascinating stories, learning new things, and improving your English skills. In this channel, we'll dive into a world of captivating tales, from classic literature to modern narratives, all presented in a fun and engaging way. So sit back, relax, and let's get started on this adventure together.
Toilet revenge. You know that feeling when you've had enough? When you watch someone you care about get walked all over, and all that built-up rage just boils over. For me, that day came not with a bang, but with a quiet, gurgling promise of an overflowing toilet. This isn't just a story about a revenge plot. It's a story about a line being crossed, about a rich couple who learned the hard way that loyalty, like plumbing, can be pushed too far. If you ever felt the satisfaction of serving a taste of their own medicine to someone who deserved it, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for a story that proves even the smallest act of defiance can lead to the most glorious messes. This one's for all the people who've been underestimated and disrespected. My name is Clark, and for a while, I made a living cleaning houses. It's an honest job, but it gives you a glimpse into people's lives you don't always want to see. Most of my clients were fine. The one I want to talk about today, not so much. I'll call them the Millers. They were a couple who on the surface had it all. A massive, pristine house with a backyard that looked like a country club, expensive cars in the driveway, and that distinct, clean-cut smell of new money. But beneath the polished facade was a rot, a deep-seated arrogance that made you feel invisible the moment you stepped into their home. I had a friend, let's call him Marcus, who worked for their factory. Marcus was one of their first employees, a loyal, hard-working man who had been with them for over 15 years, back when their empire was just a modest operation. He's a minority, and while I never heard him complain, I knew they paid him far less than he was worth. He poured his life into that company, working long, salaried hours without an ounce of gratitude. When I spoke to him a few days before my next cleaning appointment, his voice was flat, hollow. He'd been laid off. Not only that, but they were trying to frame it as a firing to avoid paying his unemployment. My blood ran cold. I knew Marcus. He's a rock. He's the kind of guy who would show up to work in a blizzard. To hear that they had discarded him like a broken tool, it was a punch to the gut. That was the first crack in my calm demeanor, a small flicker of outrage. When I arrived at the Miller's house that morning, the air felt heavy. As I was getting my supplies out of my car, I saw a young woman sitting on the porch swing, head in her hands. She was their au pair, the live-in nanny and housekeeper. Let's call her Maria. I'd seen her before, a quiet, kind soul who was always running errands, packing lunches, and doing 100 other things for family. Today, she was crying. My heart ached for her. I walked up to her and asked if she was okay. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "They just don't care," she said, her voice a whisper. "I do everything for these kids. I love them, but they treat me like furniture, like I'm just here to serve them." The last straw was when they wouldn't let me visit my mother for her birthday. It's just a constant cycle of rudeness and dismissal. It was a futile insult, plain and simple. She was a modern-day servant, chained to their whims. I looked at her, then back at the house, the very house I was about to scrub and polish for them, and felt a wave of disgust. This couple wasn't just arrogant. They were cruel. They saw people as disposable, whether it was a long-time employee like Marcus or a young au pair like Maria. "You should quit," I said, the words coming out before I could think. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. Maria's eyes widened, then hardened with newfound resolve. She stood up, wiped her tears, and walked back inside. A few minutes later, I heard the shrieking, condescending voice of Mrs. Miller, and Maria left the house for good, leaving her keys on the counter. As I started my cleaning, a cold fury began to simmer inside me. My knuckles were white as I scrubbed the counter. Each wipe of the sponge was a silent scream of frustration. The house was a monument to their callousness. I couldn't just clean it, leaving their lives as pristine as they wanted. They needed to feel a fraction of the mess they made in other people's lives. Just as I was finishing up the main living areas, Mrs. Miller, ever the demanding taskmaster, told me to stay out of the master bathroom. "The toilet's been acting up," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "It's completely clogged. The plumber won't be here for a couple of days." She left the room to go make a phone call, but her words lingered in my mind. The idea was a small, quiet seed of pure, unadulterated wickedness. It was perfect, a symbolic mess for a messy couple. My heart began to pound a little faster. This wasn't about a grand, destructive act. It was about a private, humiliating one. It was a tangible reflection of a metaphorical mess they left behind wherever they went. I finished the rest of the cleaning, waiting for the perfect moment. I took my sweet time, vacuuming every last corner, arranging pillows, and making sure the entire house was spotless. The tension was a palpable, living thing in my chest. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I imagined her face, her perfect, smug face, contorting in disgust. Once I got my cash payment and Mrs. Miller was on the phone in another room, I made my move. I walked into the pristine master bathroom, the one she explicitly told me to avoid. I could hear her voice, a high-pitched drone, coming from the other room. The silence in the bathroom was deafening. I looked at the toilet, a spotless porcelain throne of privilege. I felt a grim smile spread across my face. I pulled down my pants and did what needed to be done. It was a monument to my indignation. It was a physical embodiment of all the rage, all the frustration, and all the injustice I had witnessed that day. I stood up, took a deep breath, and with a sense of ceremony, I pressed the lever. The flush was a gurgle, a weak, defeated sound. The water level rose. And then it began. The water, a murky brown, spilled over the pristine white bowl and onto the gleaming marble floor. It was disgusting. It was vile. It was absolutely wonderfully glorious. I stood there for a moment, just watching the flood, the silent and growing mess. The feeling was a rush of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. My heart pounded with a mix of triumph and adrenaline. I quickly packed up my cleaning supplies, walked out of the house, and headed for my car. That's when I heard it. "Hey, what did you do?" Mrs. Miller's voice was a furious shriek. I got in my car and started the engine. She came storming out of the house, phone in hand. "You come back here and clean this up right now," she screamed. I rolled down my window, looked her dead in the eye, and with a grin I couldn't contain, I said, "I am done. This is not my problem. Clean it yourself." And with that, I put my car in reverse and drove away, leaving her standing there, a flustered, furious mess, just like the one I left inside. When I got home, my roommates were already waiting. Mrs. Miller had been calling nonstop, a full-on meltdown, a cacophony of screeching and demanding. One moment she was demanding I come back and clean it. The next she was telling us I was never to work for them again. The irony was not lost on any of us. I told them the whole story, about Marcus, about Maria, about the overflowing toilet. Turns out some of my roommates had worked for them too and had their own horror stories. The phone rang again and one of my roommates picked it up, a sly look on his face. He started teasing her, giving her a hard time about her little plumbing problem. We all had a good laugh, a collective release of tension and anger. In the end, it was more than just a revenge plot. It was a perfectly executed, disgusting, and utterly satisfying act of rebellion. The couple, so used to having their problems disappear at check, were forced to deal with a mess they couldn't pay their way out of. The image of her, chasing me in my car, phone pressed to her ear, while her perfect home was being ruined by something so base and disgusting. It was a victory more satisfying than any paycheck. They say karma is a bitch. Sometimes it just needs a little push. And sometimes that push is as simple as a toilet flush. It's a powerful reminder to be kind to people who work for you, to treat your loyal employees with respect, because you never know when one of them might decide to take matters into their own hands. If this story gave you a little burst of satisfaction, smash that like button and tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? And of course, subscribe for more stories just like this one.